Sanibonani nonke babukele emakhaya uyazi ke sesifikile thina nentandokazi yohlelo oluthanda kakhulu ilungelo lakho it's your right uyazi simphakela lona la kumamba phambili SABC 1 Mzansi for sure mina ke nguNonhlanhla uAlisha wakajali umangolosi omuhle ngithi nje kunina sanibonani emakhaya babukeli yize sibhekene nesimo esibuhlungu ezweni but we're still here bringing you all your consumer rights nezixwayiso we are live like I've just said so you can call us in studio on 0117146918 alternatively 7146919 consumer@sabc.co.za is our email address siyatholakala futhi lapha ku Facebook mbukeli ubugebengu yazi obuvamile kulamalanga obuyingozi futhi engakuhlukanisa nakho konke okusebenzele kanzima yilobo phela obwenziwa uma kuntshontshwe imininingwane yakho yangasese kungakho ke sekukhona umthetho obizwa iProtection of Personal Information Act POPI Act ephoqa phela izinkampani iminyango kahulumeni nabo bonke phela ababelana nabo imininingwane yakho ukuthi bayivikele ake singenehle odabeni lethu namhlanje mbukeli we must all have at one point or another in our lives shared our personal information. Phela uma si-applyela imisebenzi, ama-loans or of course disclose the information to other parties. But do you know ukuthi yonke le information iphelela kuphi? Well, the most scary thought would be for your personal information, of course, to land in the hands of criminals who could also, one, impersonate you, benzeni, go on shopping sprees, perpetrating in your name. And this is what has left many consumers in financial ruin. But financially, there is INEORMATION. The Protection of Personal Information Act is now here to shield Nina Njengabathengi. And to tell us more on the POPI Act, we're very pleased to be joined via Skype by Advocate LEBOGANG STROOM-NZAMA from the Office of the Information Regulator. Samgele futhi nentokazi Miss Ira Gunning yena-ke ubuye kwenye izinkampani ezinkulu zabameli i-Lens Attorneys. Ladies, a very good afternoon to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with you, Ira.
Hi, Alicia. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining us. Advocate, siyakwamukela nawe.
Good afternoon, Alicia, and good afternoon to all the viewers at home.
Advocate, you know, when your office was actually established, we were very blessed to have Mpansi Tlakula come here, SABC. In fact, on Yilungelo Lakho to talk about POPI. That must have been, I think, a year or two ago. Just for the benefit of our viewers, office lenu is an information regulator.
Very much, Alicia. The information regulator, we took office in 2016. We were appointed by the president in 2016, and we, on recommendation by National Assembly, then we took office on the 1st of December 2016. Our mandate is to ensure that we are the custodian of the protection of personal information, which is POPIA, and now also we are the custodian of PAIA, the Promotion of Access to Information Act. So we have a dual mandate. We are responsible to ensuring that we protect our citizens' personal information. We are saying everybody who process any personal information must do it in a responsible manner. So we are, yes.
All right, Ira, tell us a bit about yourself. Now, you have a very interesting story. You were part of the drafting committee of this POPI Act. What does it entail? What necessitated such an act?
I was not part of the drafting committee. I think
somebody
might have given you incorrect information.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to kill them after this. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I'm a lawyer. I've been specializing in POPI. I still call it POPI for the last 11 years.
Yes.
So since it was born as a bill, I've been following it, and it's my favorite legal topic ever. So I was not involved in the drafting, but I'm certainly involved in the interpretation of the act on a daily basis.
Now, Now, tell us a bit about the Act, Era. I mean, as an attorney, what is it? What are the benefits, objectives, or aims of this POPI Act?
Okay, so first of all, let me explain to you where this POPI Act comes from. Years ago in 1980, we had the OECD guidelines on privacy, and for the first time we saw principles being written down about privacy, and that was followed up by the EU directive, and POPI is largely based on the EU directive on data protection. But it has a unique African flair because it also gives effect to our constitutional right to privacy, which we find in our Bill of Rights. So this South African constitutional right to privacy is built into this legislation, which also makes our legislation very different to the rest of the world. Now, what POPI aims to do is not to prevent us from doing business, not to prevent us from using people's information or companies' information, but exactly like the advocate has said, when we use that information, we must do it in a responsible manner. And specifically, when we're using information or processing is the POPI term for using that information. If we're collecting information, recording information, receiving information, you mentioned applying for a loan, giving information to the likes of a credit provider, then they need to look after that information in a responsible manner. They need to keep that information secure. They need to tell us what they're doing with the information. If they are going to use the information for other purposes and they are not compatible with the reason why they collected it, they need to get our consent to do that. But I just want to make clear that we don't always need somebody's consent. If, for example, we have legitimate interests for processing information, we wouldn't need consent. So the main thing is to treat somebody's information in a responsible manner.
Absolutely. Now, Advocate, I mean, siyakhumbula ukuthi i-POPI Act was signed into law back on the 19th of November 2013 already. But of course, the government was just making sure ukuthi all those affected had enough time to ease into the system. Now, let's talk about ukuthi i-role yenu as the information regulator. Nina nihlangana kanjani? Like, are you the body that is going to be governing this whole thing? Abantu benama complaints, are they going to be bringing them to you? Ningena kuphi nina?
Okay, yes. Yes, you're correct. We are the custodian. We are a body that ensures we are accountable to Parliament. We are independent. We are impartial. We need to ensure that people comply with POPI. So for us, we have given our powers and our duties are set out in the Act in terms of Section 40, which give us the powers to educate, the powers to advise, the powers to train, the powers to engage the public as far as this Act is concerned. So we ensure the high level that everybody's, as Ira has said, it emanates from the right to privacy. Everybody's personal information in this country is protected, and everybody who processes it must make sure that the processing is in compliance with the Act, because the Act has 8 conditions that you need to comply with when you are processing any personal information of any person.
Era, who's affected by this POPI Act? I mean, I was talking about the banking sector, the financial sector, and so forth, but who are we specifically saying they have to comply? No way out of this. You just have to comply with POPI.
Yes, Alicia, every single company in South Africa, every single person who runs a business. So the triggers for POPI would be if you are processing personal information, which is entered into a record, and you're either established in South Africa or you are not even established in South Africa, but you are processing personal information in South Africa. And processing is very widely defined, as I've mentioned. It's just a fancy word for using information. So if you are using personal information, which is entered into a record, then POPI kicks in. And I'm yet to meet one of my clients or any organization in South Africa who doesn't process personal information. So personal information is also very widely defined, and it is anything that relates to an identifiable living human being or existing juristic person, such as a company. It could include an identifying number. It could be your name. It could be health information. It could be absolutely any information that relates back to an identifiable person. And again, just to emphasize, if you are processing personal information, it is not prohibited. I know there's a lot of fake news doing the round saying that you cannot use people's names anymore and you can't collect personal information anymore. You can certainly do so as long as you do it in compliance with the 8 conditions that the advocate was referring to. And of course, there are also extra conditions, for example, if you are using the likes of special personal information, health information, race information, or information of children.
Even, yeah. I was reading here, I'm seeing race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, national, ethnic, social origin. So the list is just endless. And these are things that people would not normally just regard as something that, you know, anybody can have access to. Very quickly, Advocate, I'm not sure if we have time, but very quickly before say ad break. Okay, all right, let me take an ad break. Advocate, I'm going to start back with you. Mrs. Mbugeli, numbers zivuliwe nazi ku screen 011-714-6918, alternatively 714-6919, consumer@sabc.co.za. Sikhona futhi ku Facebook. I'll be reading your Facebook messages shortly after this. Yilungelo Lakho, live on SABC 1 Mangolo. Sungayendawo. I-POPI Act isiqalileke sekuthiwa lapho ama-companies need to comply. Wena-ke ngabe wazini ngalo mthetho kade wasayinwa into law back in 2013? Sase sikhulumile ngale ndaba, kodwa-ke uhulumeni washo ukuthi uzoke athi ukulinda inkampani nalabo phela bebethinteka ukuthi benze sure ukuthi the systems are all ready and running in order for ukuthi kungenwe kulo mthetho. My guest today, the lovely Miss Advocate LEBOGANG STROOM-NZAMA, yena kuvela lapha information regulator, alongside the beautiful Miss Ira Gunning. She's a senior associate at Africa kubameli. Basichazela ke Mbukeli ukuthi iziphi izinto ekumele uzazi wena, because this POPI Act kahle kahle kuthiwa kumele ibenefite nina. All right, Advocate, before we went to the ad break, I wanted to find out from you, as a consumer, affecta kanjani i-POPI Act? What are my responsibilities as a consumer in regards to this POPI Act?
Okay. Act ya POPI I ka consumer e bua fela ka consumer ko section 69. Yeah, act e bilang ka unsolicited direct marketing by means of direct marketing by means of unsolicited electronic communication.
Okay, so responsibility the service providers, the businesses, not necessarily more bathong.
Yes, the thing is how work a consumer, I get active work at data subject, which is every personal information I process you are. Now, how work a consumer, I totally National Consumer Protection Act, a one the consumers. It was like a consumer section 69. Mo e leng gore era gore any any message ka phone na gore ke setsa sele se a tshwanno dira yana unless mellane le ena gore o no mo file tumellano consent ka sekgowa o sa bobedi unless o ntse o le customer ya motho o wa understand. So and then he o se customer o le motho fela o tshwanetse o fe consent ya gagene le gona o tsentse tle ko wena ga wana ha o ka re no a ke batse o nsendele di messages tse a stop. How can tlhokomela Alicia, you get this the message tse ra di thola ga o reply or stop or reply.
Yes, yes, it's got data charges, yes.
So e ba tlo tsibela tsona because bo go ba rona go hekwa ba tlhaloganye ba no tobetsa fela airtime ya fela 10 rand e yatsa. Now ere ha o le customer gona o tshentse in terms of 69.3c ba go fa le opportunity ya gore le ntse o le existing customer gore ha o sa tle o batla o na le right or ngithe and ba go notify ka address ga go gore go ntshitse mo mailing listing. So e regulate ntho tse tshwanetseng like abuse in terms of o fonela ke batho bosigo ba go offera sele se o sendela di SMS ke batho ba go ha o ba itse lo ba itse batho ba. So act e re ha before motho a ka go sendela any marketing material o tshwanetse bo melane le ena o give le consent, your own consent to melane ya gago. Sa bobedi tshentse be le gore you are already an existing customer ya that party, then that's when customer part of it.
Okay, we're losing you a little bit there, Advocate. I'm going to ask you just to shift maybe to one side. I think it's your network that we're currently struggling with because your audio is dropping in and out. But let me quickly try Era there. Era, I mean, we've had this section. I mean, we know if you buy cars, if you're signing any contracts, if you're taking any sort of contract between yourself and a third party or a service provider, I've seen this. I mean, I'm sorry, not because I'm an anchor on Yilungelo, Lakho, but I do read through those contracts and the fine print. There has been this section where it says, do you want this company or service provider to continue giving you direct messaging or sharing your information with third parties? So what's the difference now? Like, how does POPI then factor into that? Because this has always been an option. It's just that people are not reading up about it, I think.
Yes, I think it's certainly coming to light now. With POPI kicking in. But we've always had the Consumer Protection Act, and the consumer, well, not always, we've had it for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And the Consumer Protection Act and the National Credit Act also regulated direct marketing. But direct marketing is more stringently regulated in terms of POPI than it was under the other statutes.
Yeah.
So, for example, if I want to send electronic direct marketing to you, the SMSs, the emails, the automated calling machines, I can only do so if you are an existing customer and I've given you an opt-out. So when I collected your contact details, I said to you, if you don't want to hear from us, you can tell us not to contact you again. If you are a stranger to me, prospective customer lead, I would have to get your consent before I can send electronic direct marketing to you. And the trick with consent is it's not just the ordinary tick box, I consent to receiving direct marketing. We've got a prescribed form and manner which must be followed to get our consent.
Very interesting there. Let me come back to you, Advocate. Now, Era's just touched on a very interesting topic there, which is setting a lot of tongues wagging. You know, when it comes to issues of social media and regulation and all these words, people just run a mile away because they're very interested in finding out how is then POPI going to affect, for example, my WhatsApp messaging and my social media.
Definitely, Alicia, can you hear me?
Yes.
It will definitely affect social media. For an example, regulator a lot of complaints or inquiries about WhatsApp administrators to say, now create a WhatsApp group and then Bopia effectively, how do you consent? Do you go back to a WhatsApp group or now consent and bank again? Issues of misinformation, people who are busy, fake news, for an example, illegal taking of pictures of people. I mean, your photograph is a personal information. Banka photo by post more WhatsApp or wherever.
Yeah.
It's very wrong because a photograph under the definition of personal information, it's personal information. So, on this social media platform in terms of communicate privacy. So, is a place.
And Era, maybe let's go back to that issue that you raised earlier on, the issue of compliance. How do now, I mean, let's maybe unpack the ramifications or repercussions of those that are not going to be compliant. Say, for example, companies that do not give you that option to maybe opt out at the end of that contract that you've signed. Because we always talk about how gullible people are. You know, when you're signing a contract, you just want to get your loan, you just want to get whatever. So you'll just take along all those boxes. You're going to take yes, and you're not going to think about it. So in terms of compliance, and also, does a person then have that option to go back and say, you know what, I no longer want to receive certain referral information from third parties?
Absolutely, Alicia. You have that right to opt out at any stage. If you've just signed an agreement and you inadvertently gave consent, you can withdraw your consent at any stage as well. And then for companies that are non-compliant, you were asking about that. What's interesting is that any person can run to the regulator, and we're lucky enough to have a panel member of the regulator here with us. So anybody can go and bust a company at the regulator. It could be a disgruntled employee, it could be a disgruntled data subject like a consumer, it could be a competitor who can lodge a complaint with the regulator, and then the regulator can investigate the matter and they can try and settle the matter. And if they don't reach a settlement, and they find wrongdoing during their investigation, then at that stage they can issue an enforcement notice. The data subject or the regulator on the data subject's behalf could also sue a responsible party in a court of law if we can show that the non-compliance with POPI has caused us harm. And that harm could be monetary harm or emotional, psychological losses that are suffered.
Ira, please hold it there, because I was going through my research. Sorry, I've got so much going on in my head right now, but hold that thought. I want to quickly take an ad break. We're talking about POPI, ukuvikela personal information yakho. 011-714-6918, 714-6919. Yilungelo Lakho, don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Let's go straight to the lines now. We do have George all the way from Cape Town. George, a very good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. How can we assist you today?
No, thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor and a privilege to obviously have the POPI Act and those involved discussing the interview. My question just I want to ask basically is, if your company, if you're sole proprietor or you have a company, does the information officer default be the responsible person of the company to make sure that all the data in the process in the information is responsible basically as the company? Or do the information officer needs to register with the information regulator?
Advocate, do you want to take that one quickly? Then we'll have Ira. Thank you so much, George, for that question.
Yes. If you're a sole proprietor, then it means you are the information officer of that company, and you indeed need to register with the information regulator in terms of Section 55 of POPI.
And how do they register? Maybe just on the back of that, Advocate, how do they register to be part of this? Because we've been talking about the fact that the act has been signed into law and people must comply, businesses must comply, but we haven't gotten into how do they comply?
Okay, we do have an electronic portal, though we have challenges and glitches with the portal, but we are working on it. But some applications were successful, some had a problem, but if you want to register, you can go through our portal. It's an electronic one. Then you register as an information officer, or you can delegate that function to somebody to be a deputy, delegate it to a deputy information officer. If you as an information officer, like for example, a CEO of a company, you don't want to take, you can delegate that responsibility to somebody else in your company. That person to be a deputy information officer. Then you can register through our online portal. It's on our website, and then you register through that portal. Then you'll be registered as an information officer. Like I said, we have encountered a number of technical glitches, but we are working on the portal.
All right. And then maybe just to reassure George, like how long is this process, Advocate, ukuthi ba register and ukuthi bathole confirmation, get confirmation basically that they have been registered?
If the portal was properly working on some applications that were successful, it doesn't take a lot of time. Immediately you register, then you click a button, you get a response that you have been registered. It's sort of a certificate to show that you have been registered with an information officer of a particular company. Awesome. So it's electronic, it's instant. So it is not a long process that you have to wait for 2 weeks. No, immediately it gives you the confirmation that you have
confirmation. Interesting indeed. Thank you so much, George in Cape Town. I hope that we have, of course, dissected your question. Then we've answered it to the best of our ability there. Ira, is there anything that you want to add there? And then we go on with compliance issues, because here is George. I mean, he owns a company. He's also asking about these compliance issues. And, you know, what are the ramifications for those companies that do not comply? I wanted to talk to you before we went to the ad break. I was seeing here, there's an amount in pounds, I think it's pounds it is, that says if you have not, furthermore, the penalties for a breach of each differs, with a breach under GDPR can be a fine of up to 4% of annual global turnover, or 20 million pounds, whichever is greater. Now, we're not dealing in pounds, we're dealing in rands, but can you just, bring this issue back home for us here, Ira?
Absolutely, Alicia. When you're looking at the GDPR, that's the General Data Protection Regulation, which is our sister act in Europe.
Yes.
And we've got sister acts all around the world. But POPI doesn't refer to pounds. POPI refers to a fine of up to 10 million rand or 10 years in jail or both. But you must first be found to be non-compliant, and you must get an enforcement notice from the regulator and not comply with the enforcement notice, or you need to do some really silly things like trying to bribe the regulator or trying to obstruct the regulator and so on. So those criminal penalties will not just kick in immediately. There are things that you would have to do, like not comply with an enforcement notice or trying to bribe the regulator before we are going to see fines.
You hit the nail right on the head there. I was actually going to ask you this. It's one of my questions. Isn't the POPI Act then the same thing as the GDPR? I mean, you said it's a sister act, but what is the difference between the two?
Okay, so the GDPR applies in Europe.
Okay.
It applies to any companies established in Europe or even companies not established in Europe if we target citizens or people being in the EU. So it is a European law, but it's got extraterritorial effect as well. POPI is our own South African law. Now, there are lots of countries and areas around the world with their own data protection or privacy laws, like the GDPR overseas, and there's a Data Protection Act in the UK, and there's Canadian law in Canada, and lots of other African laws as well. For example, Mauritius has got its own data protection law as well. POPI is the South African data protection law, and we've got these sisters all around the world.
I also sing Impela Laba Advocate. Now, let's come back to you, Advocate. I mean, let's say now a consumer has a grievance, uguti, maybe they suspect or they found an SMS, SMS Alicia, uti, she must come shop at this place to opt out, stop, nan. What should Alicia do? And where does she go?
If Alicia is aggrieved, she must lodge a complaint with the regulator. Not in a prescribed manner and form, you lodge a complaint with the regulator, and the regulator will investigate your complaint. And as
Era, yes.
has mentioned that there are steps that the regulator will take in trying to attempt to resolve your complaint, like, will investigate, will obviously inform also the responsible party that Alicia is aggrieved. And then you need to remedy or to make sure that you don't longer process that personal information the way you're doing so. So, I mean, there are steps that the regulator will take up until such time there's the resolution of your complaint.
Okay. And I mean, we've had issues with backlogs on the system already. Advocate, you were talking about your teething problems within the system. So I guess, Kulume, is the system, I understand, withstanding the fact that kunama technical glitches at this moment, but is the system up and running? Abantu bangayizama manje. And do you have also a portal where abantu can also lay complaints on that system?
Yes, we've got, you can submit your complaint manual process, or it's Form 5 on the part of the regulations, where you can take that form, complete it, and manually submit your complaint to the regulator.
Okay. And a turnaround time for resolution? Please don't make empty promises, Advocate. Be very careful.
Yes. We are busy developing internally our rules of procedure in terms of how we're going to deal with these complaints, in terms of the timelines where we need to respond to because obviously there are PAJA implication. You have the right to be told how far your complaint is, the resolution in terms of the turnaround. So we are busy finalizing our rules of procedure internally in terms of when you lodge a complaint, it's been speedily resolved within a reasonable time. So I think we'll be finalizing that in due course.
Okay, and any costs involved with this whole process, Advocates? Abantu bayakhokha, let's say, for launching an investigation into umuntu that they feel has aggrieved them?
No, you just lodge a complaint, submit your complaint on a complaint form, and send it to the regulator.
All right.
The regulator.
All right, it's simple as that. Noma besho-ke u-advocate laphayana we-information regulator uyasho mbukela ukuthi even though i-system yabo it still has some technical glitches as can be expected from a new system abaqeda ukuyilauncha, but ungaya kuyona bakho uyakhona ukuthi ubeke wonke ama-complaint wakho. If wena for example uthola iy'namba ongazazi zikufonela zikusendela ama-SMS zithi hamba okwenza into zifuna izinto kuwena, basically trying to get you to engage with them. Lezo zinto kuthiwa aziseke emthethweni. Ilungelo lakho 011-714-6918 714-6919. Shortly after this. Consumer at SABC.co.za sikhona futhi lapha ku-Facebook 011-714-6919 714-6918. Those are the magic contact details. I understand we have a caller. All right, we have Fatli on the line. Fatli, thank you so much for joining us. Singakusiza kanjani namhlanje?
Yes, hi. Good afternoon. I'm Fatli. I'm calling from Cape Town.
Hi Fatli, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. I hope you guys are good up there.
Yes.
I have a question to ask the panelists. I have got a particular case where I've got a client who has a laptop computer that's been stolen, and the laptop computer contains a lot of client information on there. We need to know what to do at the moment. The client itself is registered with the information regulator.
Okay.
But what stands us to do now, because we need to find obviously a place where we can report the issue. And number two, I'm a little unsure about how to actually handle the informing of the ultimate end user clients about the personal information that's been compromised.
Okay, and finally, just before you go, have you started, of course, you had to report the device as stolen at the police station. Have you at least gotten that process out the way?
We have indeed done that, yes. We need the case number.
All right. Thank you so much, Fadli. You can listen for your answer on television. Thank you so much. Advocate, uFadli uyabuza lapho ukuthi njengoba bentshontshelwe i-computer yabo, i-laptop with ama-clients, personal information yama-clients, they've gone to report it at the police station, kodwa uthi bayasaba because they cannot ensure or guarantee ukuthi the people that have got their laptop cannot disseminate the information.
Yeah, it's very sad indeed, Alicia, because I mean that's what it calls to a breach in terms of our act, where you lose or somebody hack or killed or you lose a whole lot of data and it's out there. You don't know in whose hands it will land and how will those people use that information. So I think it's one of the issues. We categorize those kind of issues as our data breaches, you know, and we report it to the regulator to say, I mean, I had a device or I've been hacked and there's personal information involved there, whether it can be client information or whatever, but if it's a data breach, you need to report it to the regulator. Even if it's a truck carrying files and it gets robbed and those files end up in the wrong hands, you need to report that thing also to the regulator because a lot of people's personal information may be compromised out there.
Very interesting, Fadli. I hope that you, of course, got your answer there. All right. Ira, let me maybe come back to you. You know, I wanted to find out from you now. I've actually gone all over the place, but I wanted you to clarify a point. We'll get back to it. There's a viewer here on Facebook who's saying, "Thank you, POPI Act, but you have to explain to us as well because there's what are they saying here? Others will there ever be an agent that comes for, what are they saying here? An agent for POPI Act. So before we lose anything, explain to us so we can choose to stand for POPI Act. So I think they're basically asking, maybe this one is better for the advocate. Advocate, they're asking, do you have representatives that are going out in communities as POPI Act representatives getting that personal information from people?
No.
Okay. Very simply, no. All right. Do you plan to do that? Is that in the pipeline?
No. We've got our communications unit. If we need to communicate anything to the communities out there. We'll use our internal education and communication unit to send the message across. We don't.
All right. All right, Ira, maybe let me come back to you now. This is the point that I wanted us to ponder across. Remember, we're talking about WhatsApp and social media and third parties and so forth, but maybe talk to us about what happens then when it comes to the processing by third parties.
Yeah, so any third party that processes our information could either be what POPI calls a responsible party or an operator.
Okay.
A responsible party is the person who decides what information to collect, what to collect it, what to do with that information, and then that person could use a third party to process the information on their behalf, like an agent. So if you are a responsible party, in short, you have to comply with 8 conditions in terms of POPI. For example, you must show that you comply with POPI. You must keep information secure. You must have a specific purpose for collecting information. You must give data subject certain rights and so on. If you are an operator in terms of POPI, you don't have that many obligations. Basically, you must keep information confidential and you must tell the responsible party if there was a data breach. So the first thing that we must always work out is whether you are a responsible party in control of the data or whether you are an operator. And where you are an operator, the responsible party must enter into an agreement with you to make sure that you keep the data secure. So security of this information is incredibly, incredibly important.
All right. And then, Advocate, here's a quick one here. I think you touched on it when we started the show a little bit. Do marketers need to get permission to get information of consumers that is already on their database at this point?
Yeah. Alicia, you're correct. In the beginning, I distinguished in terms of 9 that direct marketing by means of unsolicited electronic communication is prohibited unless you have given consent. Secondly, you are an existing customer of the responsible party. Now, if you are an existing customer of that responsible party, if you want to no longer receive any marketing material from that responsible party, they must give you an option to opt out in terms of Section 69(3)(c), and they must formally communicate with you that they have received confirmation that you have opted out, to say you must stop, even though you are I've been dealing with you, I'm an existing company, but I no longer want marketing material. You've got the right to do so.
And Ira, I mean, can these marketers then go back when they find themselves being fined or facing possible, sanction because they've seriously been inavoidant or in non-compliance of the act? Can they then go back and say, no, but we already had these consumers on our database, so we didn't feel like we need to re-notify them?
If they can show that they were dealing with existing customers, then absolutely. As long as the customers were customers in a POPI compliant manner and were given an opt-out, and if they opt out, they respected that, then I think that those direct marketers would be okay. Where we've seen issues, for example, overseas, would be if a person has opted out and you keep on contacting them. So I certainly think my advice to organizations would be, if somebody has opted out, leave them alone as far as direct marketing is concerned.
And very quickly, Ira, while we're there, is there any other legislation in SA that literally regulates our privacy? I mean, besides the POPI Act, or everything is now encompassed and umbrellaed under this POPI Act? I see the advocate laughing there. You'll get your turn just now, advocate. Go ahead, Ira.
Yes, we've got our constitution where POPI actually emanates from, where we've got our right to privacy, we've got it in our common law, we've got legislation. Our Consumer Protection Act regulates privacy in direct marketing. Our National Credit Act regulates it as well. So lots of different laws that regulate it, but I think POPI is probably the most comprehensive as far as our privacy is concerned. And that is POPI's job, to regulate our privacy, whereas the other laws have other jobs as well, and privacy is incidental to that. The main job of POPI is to regulate our privacy.
You agree, advocate? To POPI, we are in this call.
Yes, the Supreme Clause in the Act, Chapter 2, Section 3, POPI takes supremacy unless there's another legislation which provides for conditions for the lawful process of personal information that are more expensive than POPI. But now we haven't found any. It's POPI.
All right.
So,
okay.
as far as processing of personal information is concerned.
Mbukelo uyazizwela-ke lapho uPopi asimazi lo sisi ukuthi ubani kodwa kuthiwa uyena ophethe insizwa uphethe ney'ntombi uphethe yonke into mekuthiwa ufuna i-regulator mangabe unenkinga khona umuntu ontshontsha information yakho uPopi uzodila naye. Let's take our final ad break. Hayibo isikhathi sesihambile. Hayi kumnandi today. We'll back shortly after this. Ungayindawo. It is our final segment. Mbukeli sengizovala ingcingo sheshisa lapho usishayele ucingo 0117146918 7146919. Ngisahleli lana nezintokazi sikhuluma ngayo iPOPI Act. Let me just quickly jump into my questions because Mbukeli sesizohamba. Now there is a question that has just come in. Ira, tell us, you know, when you go to certain places, I mean, I know in a lot of government buildings you still need to attach your Z83 form and so forth. That contains your ID, that contains a copy of your qualifications and so forth. And other jobs as well, companies that are hiring, they'll say, for example, come and submit your CV here, and then you leave your information there trusting it's going to be taken care of. What is the role then of that company after you've left your information there? Are they supposed to shred it afterwards if they won't use it? And how do you make sure that they're not using your information in an illegal manner?
Very good question. So first of all, they must have a specific purpose for asking us for that information. So they can't just collect information for just in case. They must know exactly why they're asking us for that information. And as a general rule, they must tell us why they want that information. So that is usually done by means of privacy policy or privacy statement. And then when they've collected that information, they must first of all only collect as little information as possible to fulfill that purpose. And now they've collected that information, then they can only keep that information for as long as they're authorized to keep that information. They are authorized to keep that information if there's a law that says they must keep that information, or if the data subject has consented, or if they've got a lawful business reason to keep it. So like my CV and so on, they shouldn't just keep it forever. They should have an internal rule that sets out how long they're going to keep it for, say, for example, a year. They should have a record retention policy that sets out how long they're going to keep it for. And afterwards, when they destroy that information, they must make sure that they do it in a POPI compliant manner, which means shredding it or getting rid of it in a way that somebody else is not going to pick up the data. Because if somebody else collects it, it could be a data breach.
And I suppose, I mean, this is where that question comes back in to say that, you know, somebody, a service provider can claim, well, I did not disseminate this information, even though Alicia went to drop her CV at SABC. SABC threw Alicia's CV in the dumpster and they didn't want to look at it. So they can't come back, advocate, and claim, no, but information ga Alicia basi protected, can they?
No, I mean, once the purpose has been achieved for collection, you must either destroy, delete, or de-identify that record of personal information. Okay. So you must make sure that it does no longer exist once the purpose has been achieved.
All right. Okay. And any last pointers? I mean, what are the benefits of POPI? Very bluntly, Ira, just before we go.
Oh, the fact that we're going to know what people are doing with our data. My favorite privacy quote is the late Steve Jobs that said, privacy is telling people over and over again what you do with their personal information. Yes. So POPI is not necessarily going to stop companies from using our information, but they're going to do it in a responsible way, that we know what is happening with our data, and we get the choice, for example, to opt out.
All right. Advocate, thank you so much. And of course, Miss Ira, thank you so much, ladies, for your time and invaluable knowledge. Lana Yilungelo, Lakho. Mbukeli, those were the ladies bringing you yonke into okumele uyazi mayelana nePOPI. Ma business, nani ma service provider, I hope ukuthi nizule nani ma security uthi nisayinisa lapha egate. Ngizokunika i-ID number wrong ne-number wrong because niyathanda nokusifonela. Mbukeli, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to see you next week with another live consumer affairs topic on Yilungelo Lakho. Usimpiwe will be here. Do send us your concerning topics uma ufuna ukuthi sikhulume ngendaba indaba yakho. consumer@sabc.co.za is of course our email address. Sizotholana futhi ke ngelinye ixesha. Owakajala umntwana uthi nje unithanda nonke emakhaya. Nisale kahle.
Lakho mnganwa